make a few comments about Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It's not a secret that I'm a huge fan of this man. I think he's one of our great statesmen. And not just for the state of Israel, but clearly for the state of Israel, but for the cause of liberty and free markets and national security and the rule of law, really around the world. It's important to look at Netanyahu. Look at what that country has faced over the last decade, and he as prime minister has brought them through it, not just brought them through it, but in a fantastic way. You know, he built up that economy with his economic plans over the last decade, and even before that. I remember visiting Israel just a few years ago. When I first came to Israel, I said, wow, look at all these skyscrapers going up. Look at all these highways being built. Look at this train system being built. I said, what is going on here? Well, you had a heavily socialist government before Netanyahu, and he broke the chains of socialism, and he introduced market systems to the state of Israel. Very, very important. And that led to an explosion of growth in the state of Israel. Look at what's taken place with the virus. People are wondering how in the world did the state of Israel get so many vaccination shots for a little country. The percentage of people in Israel, the citizenry in Israel, of all backgrounds and faiths, by the way, is more significant in terms of getting vaccinations than I believe any place in the world. So it's the influence of this little country with this really big talent, this big prime minister on the world stage. And what else have we seen here? We've seen the regime in Iran, this fascistic, theocratic regime in Iran, which hates Jews, which hates freedom, which hates Americans, which hates gays, which hates a lot, trying to get ICBMs with nuclear warheads on them. Now, this to me is a crucial point. You don't change horses in the middle of something like this, bring in somebody who's never really led a big government or confronted a regime like Iran. It would be like the British who threw out Winston Churchill after the World War II. I mean, everybody knows that was a historic disaster by the people there. And what else? You have a hostile EU. The bureaucracy there is a disaster. You have the International Criminal Court, which is anti-Semitic, trying to reach into Israel in order to punish the government there, as well as the military, Mossad and others, which is an appalling act. You know, it's important sometimes to measure our leaders by their enemies. Who do you think would celebrate if Netanyahu lost? The dictator in Turkey would be thrilled. The dictator in Iran would be thrilled. The dictator in Syria would be thrilled. The terrorist organizations throughout the Middle East would be thrilled. Who would be upset? Well, those countries, those Arab/Muslim countries that just made these incredible diplomatic breakthroughs with the state of Israel, I'm sure they would be very concerned about it. All the forces aligned, the Gulf states against Iran, they would be extremely concerned about it. And I personally would be extremely concerned about it, not because I'm a special pleader, even though I'm a big fan of the prime minister, because I would say to myself, what is happening to the free peoples all over the world, where they would take these great leaders and remove them? What would you do in Israel? You know, they have some conservatives running there, some people who claim to be right of Netanyahu, but claiming to be right of Netanyahu, and actually when you get into this government in Israel, which is very complicated. You know, it was set up in a way that reminds me of the Italian parliament. It's a mess, quite frankly. To be able to lead, to be able to pull forces together, to be able to make rational, sound, cogent decisions, when you have people constantly biting at your heels, when you have an extremely left-wing media that would like to see nothing more than Netanyahu fail and their desire to send him to prison and so forth, it's not so easy. And yet what he's done is absolutely exceptional. He's got a lot of challenges ahead. The state of Israel does too. So I hear people say, well, it's enough. It's long enough. It's time for a fresh face, a fresh voice. What does that mean? Time for a fresh face, a fresh voice. How is that going to change your life? The issue is substance, not platitudes, as far as I'm concerned. And I think the Israeli people are extraordinarily lucky to have Netanyahu as prime minister. And I think they'd be extraordinarily fortunate to continue with him as prime minister, particularly during these extremely challenging and difficult times. Think about how long there's actually been peace in the Middle East and with the state of Israel. It's been some time now. And I don't think you reward a prime minister by throwing him out of office. That's kind of bizarre. It's counterintuitive. By going to the farm team or the second team or the backbenchers and say, you know, let's give it a try. Let's try something new. Something new could be something very, very foolish.
For all this and much more, sign up for Levin TV.